Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening for RedR India Symposium, Managing Cascading Climate Risk When One Hazard Triggers the Next. With our focus on today, the lessons India offers for the global south. We live in a time when disasters rarely arrive alone. A flood weakens a dam, a landslide cuts off a road, a heat wave strains a power grid, and one hazard sets off the next in a chain that can overwhelm with the best laid plans. Over the next hour, we'll hear from some of the finest minds working on exactly this challenge, on how we can understand these cascades, prepare for them, and break the chain before it breaks us. Before we begin, a quick note for those joining us on YouTube. If you have any questions throughout the session, we'll try to bring as many as we can into the session later this evening. Before we move into our technical session, we would like to take a moment to show you the organization behind this evening's gathering and the work that makes these conversations like this one matter. For years, Radar India has been at the forefront of building resilience in communities most vulnerable to disasters, training responders, strengthening preparedness, and standing with people in most difficult moments. The theme for tonight's symposium isn't abstract for them, it's the reality they work in every day. So let's take a short look at that journey. Radar India, building resilience, saving lives.
RedR India is dedicated to humanitarian response and disaster risk reduction. In essence, our organization is about people. Our mission is simple: provide the right people with the right skills when it matters most. We do this by delivering training, supplying professionals, and building community resilience. We offer a range of programs and services, including expert studies and reviews, rapid assessments, post-disaster evaluations, and large-scale capacity building. Our work extends from policy and planning support to active project implementation, technical advisory, and the rapid deployment of skilled specialists. Our studies and reviews utilize mixed methods to generate evidence-based insights, ensuring our programming results in measurable, positive outcomes. When a disaster strikes, every hour counts. We provide rapid needs assessments within a critical 48 to 72-hour window to guide life-saving decisions. Our post-disaster assessments are coordinated on the ground, working closely with local authorities and affected communities to target our response effectively. We are leaders in capacity building, having delivered over 1,200 courses to 88,000 individuals, ranging from initial assessments to real-time support. Our policy and planning support embeds preparedness directly into governance, helping communities, districts, and nations prepare for future crises. We manage projects from end to end, handling design, delivery, and ongoing management, with a track record of over 190 projects implemented globally. As a trusted advisor, we provide technical support to governments, UN agencies, and NGOs, grounded in 2 decades of disaster resilience expertise. Our rapid deployment roster connects partners with over 200 qualified specialists, facilitating over 1,000 successful deployments to date. From our founding in 1979, we have spent 4 decades evolving our humanitarian action into the learning-led, partnership-driven organization we are today. As part of the RedR Federation, we share a commitment to the principles of neutrality, impartiality, independence, and unity across 5 member countries. Ultimately, RedR is about people. We ensure the first responders in every disaster are ready. Connect with us at redrindia.org.
Humanitarian practitioner with over 20 years of international experience in disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, recovery, and humanitarian coordination across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Caribbean. Based in Bangalore, India, he has worked with the United Nations, international organizations, government, and civil society to strengthen resilience in disaster and crisis affected contexts. Most recently, Rahul served with the UNDP Crisis Bureau in New York, where he supported global crisis response, recovery, and resilience initiatives through search deployments, strategic partnerships, and advisory support. His previous experience includes technical and managerial roles with IOM, UNICEF, WFP, UN Habitat, and multiple INGOs, as well as extensive field experience in Bangladesh, Myanmar, Kenya, Malawi, Kyrgyzstan, Montenegro, and Nepal and India. A lawyer by training with postgraduate degrees in international humanitarian action and international law, Rahul brings a systems perspective to complex risk management, linking climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, humanitarian action, and sustainable development. He has led multi stakeholder partnerships, coordinated large scale humanitarian response, and contributed to policy and institutional strengthening across diverse contexts. At the RedR India Symposium, Rahul will share insights from both field operations and global policy engagements on managing cascading climate risks and building integrated approaches to resilience in an increasingly interconnected risk landscape. Thank you for being with us. I'll now hand the session over to you.
Thank you so much, Analia. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to the RedR India Symposium on managing cascading climate risk when that triggers the risk. So climate change is not only increasing the frequency and intensity of hazards, it's also exposing how deeply interconnected our critical systems have become. Today, the greatest impacts often arise not from the initial hazard itself, but from the chain of failures that follows. When disruptions to energy, water, transport, health, and communications reinforce one another and transform a localized event into a systemic crisis. Recent experiences in Kerala, Chamoli, and our increasingly heat-stressed cities remind us that managing disasters today requires us not just to understand and plan for the cascading risks, not just simply to respond to individual hazards. So this symposium gains importance and is an opportunity to move from recognition to action through evidence, through case studies, and practical experiences from India and the global South. We will examine where our current planning approaches fall short, identify ways to strengthen cross-sector coordination, and explore how humanitarian agencies, government, researchers, practitioners can work together to anticipate and interrupt cascading risks. The ideas generated today will form the foundation for a practitioner focused publication from REDA and future training modules that RedR India will develop to help build a new generation of responders, that is you and other colleagues who might be just getting into the field, equipped to manage cascading climate risks. We are privileged to have four outstanding speakers with us, each bringing deep expertise and unique perspective from research, policy, and practice. I will introduce each speaker before their respective session. Each speaker will have 8 minutes for their presentation, after which we will move directly to the next session to maintain our schedule. Rather than taking questions after each presentation, may I just suggest that we will have a moderated question and answer session at the end of all four presentations. I encourage everyone joining us online to actively participate by posting your questions and comments in the live chat throughout the event. My colleague Amelia would be helping us in collating the questions, and then we will be taking and on the annual discussion. And let's please make this as interactive as possible and as engaging as possible, given the stellar speakers that we have. With that, let's begin. The first of our speakers is going to speak on understanding cascading climate risks, triggers, chains, and the Indian hazard landscape. Dr. Rohit Sharma. So Dr. Sharma is a climate adaptation and resilient agriculture specialist with over 9 years of experience working across the United Nations, government, and international development sector. His work focuses on strengthening climate resilience through evidence-based policy, institutional capacity development, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable agriculture. He has contributed to national and state-level climate initiatives, including climate adaptation planning, climate smart agriculture, water resilience, and knowledge systems, while supporting governments, humanitarian actors, and development partners in translating climate science into practical action. Dr. Sharma is an active member of RedR India and has participated in several national and international initiatives on climate resilience, capacity strengthening, and sustainable development. He holds a PhD in climate science from the Terry School of Advanced Studies and has associated with global academic and policy exchange programs, including the Erasmus Plus at Free University Berlin, the Central University, European University, Summer University, and the Prosper.net. With that, Dr. Sharma, the floor is yours. You have 8 minutes.
Thanks, Rahul. Good evening, everyone. Rahul, can you please confirm if you can hear me? Yeah. Can anyone please confirm if I can
Yes,
be
Dr.
heard?
Sharma, please go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Rahul, once again. And thanks a lot, RedR India, for giving me this platform. I would like to start with congratulating RedR India for the 23rd year of its foundation. They have been doing a brilliant job. For today's talk, I would be broadly talking about what are the compound climate risks, what are the situations where these kind of multiple interactions happen, what are the common understanding on these, what are the science, what is the science behind that, and how these are particularly exposed to the Indian subcontinent, and what we can do for the preparedness on that. So going ahead, like, let me just begin with one of the incidents which happened, and we all remember this. In May 2020, cyclone Amphan struck the eastern coast of India, and that was the peak time of COVID-19 lockdown. So suddenly what happened, the overall the evacuation shelters which were designed to have the social distancing, treating the patients, was suddenly converted into was suddenly tackling another incident, which was the cyclones and its impact. So the challenge wasn't that the cyclone has hit, the challenge wasn't that the pandemic was going on. The interaction between these two challenges and the hazards, that is what made it a little worse, and that is the essence of understanding what exactly is the compound risk. I would argue this wasn't an exception. If we talk about the India and subcontinent, it was an early signal of what disasters and what disaster management increasingly is going to uh, face like, and it's going to look like in the coming days. Or coming years probably. Now let's look what it matters going forward on the economic perspective. Alone in India, why should we care on that? Because these interactions cost us a lot of money. On an average, 2 to 5% of our annual GDP is lost in the hazards like these. And when these hazards interact, those impacts multiply across health sector, uh, agriculture sector, infrastructure, labor productivity, and livelihoods gets impacted. So then the scenario doesn't even, just focus on being the climate issue. Now it becomes a developmental issue. It becomes a governance issue. So what exactly, like understanding what exactly is the compound risk and making it more relatable. Uh, there are a couple of definitions put across, but IPCC now has put across this definition: when a compound climate risk is a combination of multiple hazards or drivers that are together happening and creating a larger risk than any single hazard or risk would have done, then it is a compound risk. So understanding this distinction changes how we assess the risk, how we design our early warning systems, and how we prepare these communities. So it's not about one event amplifying other. It becomes like how they're combiningly impacting the larger population altogether. So once we've understood this definition, the next question all across comes across whether these yep. Can I what? Okay. Okay, I'll do that. Is it visible now? Can I go ahead? Okay, thanks, Murthy. So yeah, so when we have understood this, then the question comes across like, are all the compound risks the same? Not really. Researchers have generally compounded and given them different categories. For instance, like the first, how to understand and how what exactly is a compound hazard looks like for a practitioner and for a district level officer. So the first preconditioning, where one event creates condition that worsens the another one. For example, drought is drying the soils before heavy rain falls. Second comes on the multivariate, when a heat wave plus humidity plus a power grid or plus these all events happening within the week, within the same week, separating just by a couple of days, then this becomes a multivariate hazard. When we talk about the sequential, the COVID and the cyclone Amphan example comes in the picture. Especially hazard when upstream dam releases. For instance, if we relate it to the Kerala floods of 2018, when the upstream dam releases compounded the downstream floods within the state. So these kind of categorization for a district level officer has been done by by a good amount of researchers and the research fraternity altogether. So there has been a lot of science coming across. Is then the overall framework around these kind of compound risks and hazards have been established, but the science behind this exact risk and hazard on the compound is still evolving. And if I talk about how it is evolving, that if we consider that we have understood it well, then these kind of studies come in the picture, where most of the research which has been conducted on these kind of multivariate and special hazards are just focusing broadly on the European and North American, or probably East Asian side. The South Asian and the Indian subcontinent has been rarely studied, and very less amount of research has been conducted on that. So in short, that this science is still catching up. What will be the scenario when two hazards meet up? What could be the next actions to be taken when these kind of scenarios happen? So this is still being studied. This is still a little more to be explored. But there are enough evidences to show that these kind of impacts are happening for the South Asian and the Indian subcontinents. For instance, across India, we're already seeing emerging compound risk hotspots. For instance, for the eastern coast, cyclones increasingly overlap with the extreme heats. In northern India, heat plus drought reinforcing happening year after year. There has been incidents where there have been drought year, and then suddenly there have been flash floods and heavy rainfall altogether. Urban areas are becoming prone to prolonged heats, and which is often followed by intense rainfall. And these aren't just isolated events. This reflecting a changing hazard landscape altogether that requires a different way of planning. Let's look at how one compound event unfolded in India. This is talking about specific to India's 2022 heat drought feedback, where extremely high temperatures combined with prolonged rainfall deficits. So these dry soils retain more heat, which further intensified the heat waves. The result was substantial reduction in the wheat yield across the northern India. And once the agricultural belt is hit, then there is subsequent system failures coming all together. One hazard which altered the system in ways, but it strengthened the food security aspect in the other way. So it demonstrates why agriculture, food security, and DRR and DR management can no longer be planned separately. And that's where the question comes in: whether are we ready to predict them, ready to understand them properly, and is the science supporting us to predict them efficiently and as per the time? So here comes is, yes, the science can predict it, but up to a point. We can increasingly identify what kind of seasonal patterns are coming, what kind of hotspots are being generated in different parts of the country. We are tapping up the early warning indicators such as soil moisture and sea surface temperatures. But still, what we cannot reliably predict is what will be those exact timings where what will be the location of these kind of hazards, what would be the scale of these kind of cascading impacts, and that uncertainty. I think my screen has again gone. I'll share it again. I'm so sorry for this interruption. uh, I'll just wait for a couple of seconds. Yeah, is it back on the sharing now? Okay, so I was telling about what we can forecast right now and what we cannot forecast. So there are uncertainties still remaining, where we cannot reliably predict what will be the exact timings, location, scale of these kind of cascading impacts. But this uncertainty isn't a weakness of science which has been studied or which has been getting practiced, but it's the nature of these kind of complex systems interacting with each other. These, which means the preparedness cannot be solely planned. The management plans and the recovery plans cannot be solely prepared on that. We need to think a little ahead, what could be there. So what does this mean for the practitioner, probably a district level officer? First, we need to plan for these interconnected risks rather than individual hazards. What kind of disaster preparedness must become genuinely cross sectoral? So the department that are currently planning the isolation, planning and isolation, probably the health sector, agriculture sector, water and disaster management, need to have shared drill, not just shared reports and all. Further, we need to understand what kind of preconditioning is there. Early warning systems that are flagging the soil moisture. Is there a heat building up? These are the signals which we can predict and we can think upon. What could be the next if it is happening together? So none of this the action requires a perfect forecast per se. These are the common understandings which has been gathered through so many years of humanitarian support. But what it needs is that this requires a better coordination within the government structure, within the systems, within the last mile connectivity, within the last mile actors on the ground when this kind of hazard happens. Let me just, this is this last slide of my presentation. I'm leaving you with this three simple messages like that. First of all, the compound risks are becoming increasingly common. Second, the science is improving our understanding, but it will always remain uncertain because of the new compounding impacts which is coming across. Preparedness needs to shift from managing a hazard at a one time to managing interconnected risk which might happen due to these risks, these hazards. So if at the end there is a if there is a thought which I would want to leave all of you with, would be that communities do not experience disasters one hazard at a time, and neither should our planning be. So thank you everyone. This was my time. Back to you, Rahul.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. You've flagged the interconnectedness of the hazards and all that, and the importance of still preparing for the compounding and sort of cascading crisis that might happen, and also on the black swan events, for things that we have not yet prepared for, but nevertheless need to prepare for. We'll try and find some of answers for some of the questions that you have posed, and really important questions that you have posed, to our next speaker, who's going to speak on when one failure triggers the next, case study and cascading disasters in India. So that's going to be presented by Group Captain Dr. Shahjahan Naqvi, who is a professional navigator with over 4,000 hours of flying experience and a PhD in disaster management. That was on analysis of existing legal and institutional frameworks for disaster response in India from the Cherry School of Advanced Studies. Over the course of a long career in uniform, he served in the Kargil War and took part in the tsunami relief operations in the Maldives in 2005 and the response to the Mumbai terror attacks in 2008. His humanitarian work spans some of India's most demanding emergencies, including the Latur earthquake of 1993, the Indian Ocean tsunami, the Koshi floods of 2008, experience that has shaped a practical field first understanding of how relief operations actually unfold. Following his retirement from military service in March 2025, he has continued his work in a teaching and advisory capacity. He serves as visiting faculty at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication and at the Center of Excellence, IIT Roorkee, the Greater Noida. He is also strategic advisor to RedR India and a trainer in search and rescue, where he works with humanitarian professionals preparing for deployment in complex environments. Sir, before I give the floor to you, may I please remind all our participants to please pose your questions. Please take note and pose your questions on the online chat, and we'll be happy to take that on in the Q&A session. Over to you, sir. Okay, please bear with us while we are getting Dr. Shahjahan to come in. So while we are sorting out the technical issues, or Dr. Shahjahan, may I please introduce the next speaker if she's ready? And the next speaker is Dr. Bilkis Dar, who is going to speak on the institutional preparedness and governance. Why siloed single hazard planning cannot contain a cascade. Dr. Bilkis Dar is an assistant professor of disaster management at the Rashtriya Raksha University, Jammu and Kashmir. She has experience in disaster management, research, and capacity building. She actively contributes to the successful implementation of disaster management initiatives and integrating DRR principles into practice. Her work sits at the meeting point of academic research, teaching, and applied capacity building for those who respond to emergencies. She was also part of the Rashtriya Raksha University delegation for the university's Memorandum of Understanding with the Jammu and Kashmir State Disaster Response Force, aimed at strengthening training, research, and capacity building in disaster management. Beyond the classroom, she speaks to wider professional audiences on various topics, including technology-based disaster response for the Global Center for Environment and Disaster Management. With that, Dr. Dar, the floor is yours.
Is my screen visible now? Am I audible? I think I'm audible. Am I audible?
Dr. Dar, you are audible, but your screen, I can hear you, but your screen is a mix of all the screens.
Is it clear now? Can you see my screen now? Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to the session. To start with, as the speaker before me has already talked about the cascading disasters and the concept, I'll just be focused on the governance and the institutional preparedness related to the cascading disasters. To start with, I just want everybody to, kind of just think about a summer morning in the mountains, and it is a peak pilgrim season, and there has been lots of intense rainfall, and then a cloudburst happened. And we know whenever such kind of situations happen, there are lots of other things that come across, and disaster or hazard doesn't come alone. So the scenario will look like this: that flash floods run downstream, landslides have blocked the only highway that connects the villages. Bridges have collapsed, and power stations have failed, and communication failure is because there is lack of power supply to the towers, and batteries have run out. Ambulances are not able to reach to reach to the patients because of the blocked roads. So the scenario is of this kind, that there are certain disasters happening together, like the cloudburst, roads blocked, power failure, and rescue has been delayed, and lots of tourists and residents are stranded. uh, to start with, this is a very common phenomena that happens across the national highway, or which connects Jammu and Kashmir, and you all must have been very familiar with this kind of incidents, where we can come to know that the road is blocked, and this is the kind of a scenario that we usually face, or the administration faces. You know what the best part is? Since the disaster had this incident had lots of things happening together, but if we look into the role of the departments or the institutions, they did the best. They did their role very effectively. If we talk about like the meteorological department has issued its warning. They have had the early warning of the heavy rainfall, or for that matter the cloud burst. The public work department have deployed the machinery for the road clearance. Power department have they have activated their rescue and restoration teams. Health department has prepared emergency services, and district disaster management authorities coordinating the rescue operation. But considering everything, every department is kind of playing its role in a best possible way, following their plans, their SOPs, but still the disasters of this kind keep escalating. We need to know why. Because you know the real question is that because these systems don't operate, they operate in isolation. And these systems usually, if there is a landslide which is blocking the road, the blocked road is delaying the rescue. The delayed rescue is affecting the healthcare. Power failures are disrupting the communication, and communication failures slow the decision making. So one hazard becomes many interconnected emergencies. When we see that a hazard is becoming many interconnected emergencies, this is what a cascading disaster looks like. So the real question here isn't that are our institutes prepared? It is really, are they prepared to work together with multiple systems failing at once? This is what we should aim to look upon. So we have the very basic concept of what hazard is, what a disaster is, what is a cascading disaster. We will just talk about how when does this fragmentation, this institutional fragmentation meet a real disaster? There are certain examples. I'll quote Kedarnath 2013, when it was a extreme rainfall and it triggered flash floods, landslides, roads, and everything was failed almost simultaneously. The infrastructure needed for rescue has itself been destroyed. So what we learned from that lesson, that disasters damage not just the communities, but the systems required to respond are also affected. Similarly, in Cyclone Amphan 2020, it struck during the COVID pandemic, and protocols that were in place said that we need to evacuate people to the shelters. But public health departments were saying that we have to maintain the distance. Both were correct at their own place. We all know, like, if we talk about these disasters separately, both were completely scientifically correct. But doing both at once required coordination the system wasn't built for. So what we learned from that, the gap isn't expertise, it is connecting expertise across the sectors. So this is actually our main concept of this talk, and this is what I will be focused upon. So considering the expertise and the experience that I have seen in my life, or I have been observing over years, and the researchers are also working upon and suggesting us, the major barriers in the governance are mainly that come up are the centralized command system, mismatch in the scales, and we are linking the capital. I'll just explain it a little bit. You know, it actually, when an operational and the fiscal authority sits at the higher tiers, which usually happens in the disaster management structure or architecture of India, it delays the fast localized decisions, and that a cascading crisis demands, because the command is centralized, because the operational and the fiscal authorities at a higher tier, so the localized decisions are delayed because of it. So if we see that the top-down or the imported resilience frameworks often clash with India's ecological sensitivity or the diversity. There are hyper-local vulnerabilities if we talk about the vulnerabilities, because India is quite a diverse country. And the framework, for example, built for the Himalayas doesn't map cleanly into the suburb, Sundarbans, or for that matter, if there are the frameworks for the mountains that won't work for the plains. So the mismatch in the scale is one that has that came up several times, and weak linking capital. Local communities are genuinely good at short-term survival. What they lack are formal bridging connections to regional authorities. That turn the survival into the long-term transformative resilience. But we have seen that the communities are very good. The indigenous practices are very good, but they lack that formal bridging and that connections with the regional institutes, and that leads to the leads to the cascading disasters or the emergencies in the long run. So, what should institutional preparedness look like going forward? There are the four major shifts that are required. The first is we need to shift from a hazard-based to the system-based planning. Stop treating floods, power failures, and transport breakdowns as separate problems. Start mapping how they interact, hazards as an interconnected web, not and start treating hazards as an interconnected web, not as an individual events or isolated events. Second is decentralized authority. As I said, like centralized command is a barrier that has come up. So decentralizing the authority, giving district level authorities or institutions real fiscal discretion. This is something that is needed. The real fiscal discretion and operational autonomy. I have been working with DDMAs, and we see there is a certain level of operational autonomy, but they really need that real fiscal discretion. And we all know these cascading disasters are experienced locally first. Local administration really needs the power to act before waiting for approval up the chain. This usually happens and this delays the decision making and the response. Third is cross-sectoral protocols. Okay, I'll be talking a little bit more about it. We need some cross-sectoral binding protocols where police, health, power, telecom, engineers, NGOs, and disaster authorities need joint early warning systems and joint simulation exercises, not just individual mock drills, but shared ones. So coordination is rehearsed before it is needed for real. There are some incidents where these kind of drills happen. These kind of drills take place. Like I've seen this joint kind of an exercise taking place when there is Shri Amarnath Ji Yatra. But we need those kind of drills and those sectoral and cross-binding protocols at a general level, general district administration level, or for that matter, state administration level. Usually, planning for disasters, it should be very integrated. There should be integrated agencies of non-governmental organizations, and there should be a very multi-stakeholder partnership and coordination in place, and then the joint drills should take place so that the disasters are really confronted well. Fourth is we have to plan explicitly for compound cascading scenarios. What happens if for example, we have to plan, we have to think in such a way that what happens if an earthquake hits in the winter? What happens if a cloudburst during a major pilgrimage, happens? Which usually does happen. We have lots of incidents. We can see like past incidents in Sri Amarnath Yatra where there was a cloudburst and lots of pilgrims were affected by that. Yeah, for that matter, a flood alongside a disease outbreak. These combinations need to become a routine part of our preparedness. Uh, Not just the edge cases. We really need to understand in this way so that we understand the compounding risk. We understand the response strategy for these kind of a disasters where there is cascading, when one disaster is triggering other, when one protocol is in place and other may be contradictory to that protocol. So this is something that we want to we should actually focus upon now. So, as I earlier in the start of my this session, I was talking about the incident that may have happened, and let's go back to that incident and see. Every institute did its job very well. Warnings were issued, engineers responded, power teams were mobilized, hospitals prepared, rescue was coordinated, and still the disaster escalated because the links between those institutes weren't strong enough. The lesson is that preparedness isn't measured by how many disaster plans we have. It is measured by the strength of the connections between those plans. Now we know that every department is having a plan, and then we need to plan on the interconnection of those plans. If disasters are interconnected, as we are saying, our institutions have to become interconnected too. Only then do we move from managing individual hazards to managing cascading risk and building communities that are genuinely resilient. Because if we talk about the concept of resilience, the collective resilience has always played a role in framing communities as disaster resilient. Thank you very much. This is all from my side today. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you so much, Dr. Dar, for painting the comprehensive picture in terms of the systems-based approach that one needs to adopt in India and elsewhere, of course, as well. Your points on decentralized decision making, on localization based on the context are pertinent. The cross-sectoral protocols and the integration of them is something that we need to take a note of. And then, of course, we need to plan ahead for these compound events. A point that has been reinforced by both the speakers. With that, may I please again invite Group Captain Dr. Shajanati. Sir, I have introduced you before. So the floor is yours now for the next 8 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah, is my screen visible? Yeah. All right. Good evening,
Loud and
everyone.
clear.
Thank you, Dr.
Loud and
Rohit.
clear, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rohit,
And your
for setting the
screen is
context.
still being, at least on, yeah.
Can I continue? Can I continue? Okay. Okay. One moment. I,
Please go ahead, sir.
is the screen visible? One moment. I'm just coming to it. Is the screen visible now? Okay. Good evening, Dr. Rohit, for setting up, the context, and Dr. Bilkis Dar for taking
Yes,
it. Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let's dive straight into our final session, which is when one failure triggers the next. We would be examining three case studies, but before that, I would spend the next 8 minutes or so unsettling a very comfortable assumption that we all have slipped into, which is when we plan for a disaster, do we plan for the disaster? Well, let's examine these three case studies and understand why this question is important. Is the slide transition happening? Is the slide transition happening? Okay, great. So let's examine why the cascading effect kills more than the initial trigger. The initial hazard almost always doesn't cause the greatest harm. A damage accumulates, and as the shockwave propagates through interconnected systems, the system interdependencies do kick in. Power systems, water systems, hospital roads, systems that are very tightly coupled, but almost never planned together to be operational or to absorb the failure of the other system. The sequence is almost the same. A single hazard trigger happens, system interdependencies get going, and then finally the cascading effect causes such impact downstream that it completely eclipses the initial trigger. This remains no more a theoretical concern for our country. It's been a recurrent theme, and I bring you three such instances from completely different settings. Let's examine the cascading logic. Our first case is Kerala floods of 2018. Uh, this is 8 years ago, almost around this time. Kerala received unprecedented rainfall, almost 300% more. As expected, this caused flooding. However, it didn't remain there. 54 dams were filling up to the brim, and 54 authorities who monitored these dams released water almost simultaneously with no staggered protocol. This caused extreme flood downstream in the valleys, and the flash flood was not alone caused alone by the rains themselves. What it also did was the cascading chain further strengthened with the slopes getting saturated. National Highway 66 got severed, and all the feeder roads got disrupted, causing disruption of supplies, and the responders couldn't reach the affected community. And lastly, what got overwhelmed in this case was the health system. Hospitals got isolated, and a kidney disease, a bacterial infection that gets transmitted through animal urine, through water, leptospirosis outbreak happened, and it remained long after the flood waters receded. The key finding in this case study is the dam release decisions were taken independently by 54 authorities with no shared downstream model. The flood that killed was man-made. We move on to our second case study, which is Chamoli 2021. Here again, a glacial break happened. This caused debris flooding, and it overwhelmed the entire Alaknanda river system. This is a classical case where a single hazard planning, which my previous two speakers kept emphasizing, failed. There were no glacial outburst sensors upstream in this case, and the workers who were employed at two NTPC dams downstream had zero advance notice. Almost instantaneously, 200 plus lives were lost when these two dams were washed away. There was also an incident of two tunnels where 41 workers got trapped. Back then, there was no protocol for extraction of stranded workers inside a tunnel. And what was also witnessed in this case was the cross-sectoral ownership gap. While NDRF, SDRF, NTPC, which owned the two dams, the hydel projects, National Highway Authority, district, each responded to their own piece as per their own SOP, but nobody owned the whole chain. As was brought out by the previous two speakers, a key finding that emerges here is that a hazard with no recognized owner gets a cascading effect across systems. In this case, energy, rescue, and river systems got overwhelmed, while each of the systems were responding in their own isolation and in silos. We will move to our final case study, which is the heat wave. It's a rather one of the latest entrants into the discourse of DRR. Extreme heat is characterized by temperatures of 45 degrees and above, and it causes a domino effect as is being witnessed. It causes a spike in power demand, grid overload happens, and outages are the result. This leads downstream to water pump failure, cooling systems get overwhelmed, and finally, heat-related casualties overwhelm our hospitals. Let's understand who bears the tertiary impact. Hospital patients, especially those on life support system, outdoor workers with no shade or no shade break enforcements, urban slum residents almost the first to lose power when power needs to be rationalized, and as always, pregnant women and infants. The key finding in this from this case study is that the heat cascade unlike the previous two that we discussed, does not have a single event moment. It could take hours or days after the initial trigger for the cascade to build up and move from one system to another. And that is precisely the reason why it evades standard response triggers. And what has been witnessed and evidenced in heat wave is that it disproportionately concentrates, almost with mathematical precision, harm on those who have less access to resources and favor means to cope up with the crisis. Now, all is not doom and despair. The cascade chain was broken, even as official system may have failed or been overwhelmed. Let's examine these three cases where the chain was interrupted and what worked, so that we can carry forward the lessons ahead. In case of Kerala, when the state and the NDRF boats were struggling to reach the narrow lanes, the fishermen community rose to the occasion, and a staggering 65,000 people were evacuated safely. A similar community outreach was witnessed when WhatsApp-based volunteer coordination centers tracked the rescue efforts in geographically dispersed affected areas. And this was when the official communications were down. Is my screen not visible? Okay. And then what we witnessed in Chamoli was that while an SOP for extraction of tunnel workers did not exist back then, NDRF improvised using coal mine techniques from the northeast and extricated 12 survivors to safety. Similarly, a lot of urban bodies responded to heat wave. This improvisation, if you could see, Kerala classically the community, Chamoli is where the responders improvise, and heat wave was somewhere where the policymakers improvise. Heat wave, some of the urban bodies opened up school and state-owned community centers as overnight cooling shelters, and prioritized the elderly and the poor, and this directly reduced hospital related heat related admissions in hospital by 50%. And this was a classical example of where cross departmental handshake between health and education uh, interrupted the cascade chain and worked well to reduce casualties by 50%. A common thread that we can see is every crisis we see improvised solutions coming up, and these improvised solutions actually crossed a sector boundary where the formal plan stopped. And these are the improvisations that we need to take forward and ensure that this become part of our standard uh, processes. I finally leave the informed audience with three questions. One, what turned a single hazard into a chain, and where were the escalation points? This would be key for policy formulation. And next would be, where was the cascade interrupted, and which improvisation deserve to become standard practice? This should help district level disaster management plans and practitioners, especially the responders, to step up. And finally, for the community and for the country at large, who was hit hardest downstream, which groups bear the secondary and the tertiary effects rather than the initial one? With those questions, I end this, and thank you, RedR, for giving the opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdi. Some very good case studies that you've presented, and it sort of also harks back to the points that were being made by Dr. Dar in terms of localized decision making, contextualization, and empowerment, and interdepartmental sort of help. So you did give an example of how interdepartmental sort of coordination took place in some of the case studies. Something very interesting that you mentioned, and maybe we can come back to that in the question and answer round, is the importance of improvisation that you mentioned. And I mean, in your experience, how much of that has been sort of embedded within the standard operating protocols in terms of flexibility and those kind of things? We can come back to that. May I please again remind all our viewers and people who have checked in to Ask your questions in the chat. Feel free to interact with the presenters. And of course, we will be taking on your questions in the question and answer round. Now, with that, I'm thanking him for the patience in terms of listening to the previous three speakers. May I please invite the final speaker who is going to speak on the breaking the chain, what humanitarian agencies can do, and he's going to bring in the challenges and solutions. Professor N. Vinod Chandramenon is the president of RedR India and has over 37 years of working experience in the fields of disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and public policy emphasis. Currently, he is the adjunct professor at Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham and the advisor at the Amrita School of Sustainable Development. He's also the regional director for Asia at the International Emergency Management Society, Times, which is headquartered in Oslo, Norway. He's also the member of the advisory board of Onticton AG, Switzerland, which is headquartered at Ljubljana in Slovenia. He's member of the peer committee on technological preparedness for dealing with national disruptions, established by the Indian National Academy of Engineering. He's the senior advisor and mentor of the International Institute of Information Technology, I Square IT, Pune, being the member of the governing board of Shikshan Prayog and the member of the advisory board of the Center of Excellence in Disaster Management at the Development Management Institute, Patna. He's the senior advisor and data evangelist of India Excellence Foundation and the mentor of engineering students participating in E-Yantra Innovation Challenge of IIT Bombay. Professor Menon was nominated by the Prime Minister of India National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA) with the status of a Union Minister of State in the Government of India from 2005 to 2010. He is a recipient of the 2010 Scotch Award for his contributions in the field of disaster management. He has authored several publications and is co-editor of the Humanitarian Logistics, published by Springer in 2010. With that introduction, so the floor is all yours. Professor.
Thank you, Rahul. It's a great pleasure to see you back in India. I think you're back in Bangalore, right? Hello, can you hear me? Good. Yeah. First of all, greetings to all of you on the Foundation Day of RedR India. And it's a great privilege and an honor for me to listen to all these resource persons who are speaking and also Rahul Pandit anchoring it so well. Thank you very much. I think the symposium is discussing managing cascading climate risks when one hazard triggers the next. And I have been asked to talk on breaking the chain, what humanitarian agencies can do in terms of challenges and response. I just finished another discussion on the floods in Assam before I joined this call. And right now, with 75 people having lost their lives in Assam in the floods, and this is not a very unique situation. Assam faces several waves of floods. Starting from June, July to August, September, we have the floods happening in Assam. And right now, actually, we are also seeing the impact of El Nino, the super El Nino, which has been mentioned. And then it was mentioned that we will actually be having a deficit of water, of rainfall and water in many cities because of the El Nino effect and also because of the changing hyperlocal weather patterns. So this topic on cascading climate risks is extremely relevant now because we are seeing the way in which what is normally mentioned as unprecedented rainfall is happening. We see the heat wave happening in many cities around the world, and we also see a lot of challenges which the communities are facing. So when we are actually looking at cascading climate risk, we need to also understand the linkage between
disasters, extreme weather events, and climate change. Earlier we used to think that disaster management is a discipline which can be basically handled by disaster management professionals. But with climate change becoming a major concern, we find that we also need people from environmental sciences, people from meteorology, people from various other disciplines related to climate change also coming in. So you have the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Indian Meteorological Department, Geological Survey of India, the many other institutions actually all working together, including the NRSC, the National Remote Sensing Center, ISRO, the Department of Space, and others. And technology is trying to also come in to help us in finding solutions. So I would like to basically mention, in terms of the challenges, the need for clearly understanding the risk, vulnerability, and exposure is very important. Multi-hazard risks have to be understood because we find critical infrastructure crumbling because of the monsoon, because of the rains, because we have not really factored in these kind of changing hyperlocal weather patterns while building some of these critical infrastructure. So we find national highways caving in, or we find tunnels collapsing, and we find many others indications which also mean and also suggest that there should be a need to look at a big picture view while we are actually designing systems. So I would like to basically go back into the question of exposure, and vulnerability has to be seen in terms of what is also described as a differential vulnerability. Let us take an example of a household which is a woman-headed household and also belonging to either a Dalit family or a particularly vulnerable tribal group. And so we have different such vulnerabilities, and assuming that that particular household actually has an elderly person who is either bedridden or wheelchair bound, we also have to basically try and see that there is a differential vulnerability. And assuming that there are also people with disabilities, and disability now in India, the government of India has actually identified 21 categories to describe a person with disability. And it includes thalassemia, it includes hemophilia, and it also includes acid attack victims. So which means that even our own understanding of vulnerable sections and weaker sections need to actually be realistic, and the ground truthing is required. And we have also seen that these cascading disasters are also something which we need to understand. We plan for a single hazard, as both all the three speakers have actually identified instances of multiple hazards actually leading to cascading disaster risk. One of the most important illustrations of this kind of a cascading risk, which has actually been faced in the recent times, is the triple disaster in Japan in 2011. We started with an earthquake which triggered a tsunami, and then it also resulted in a nuclear meltdown in Fukushima in Japan. So it's an earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear incident actually became a triple disaster. So the cascading impact was seen. You also could see the Kobe earthquake, when the earthquake also triggered large outbreaks of fire in gas pipelines. So there are many events. You could also have in Japan, you could have the accidents happening if we are not careful. So between the primary wave and the secondary wave of an earthquake, they switch off the Shinkansen, the bullet train, so that people do not lose their lives. And you find that there are road accidents happening because the impact of the earthquake is actually affecting communities. So in terms of the cascading disasters, another example which comes to mind is what happened when the COVID pandemic happened, the COVID-19 pandemic, when it hit in 2020, we also saw that everyone was advised to observe social distancing. But when the floods happened in India during the monsoon, immediately after the lockdown period, we saw that actually, even during the lockdown, when people were in the relief camps, it is not possible for us to have enforcement and compliance of social distancing. When large numbers of people are there in the relief camps, the social distancing was not possible, and it was becoming a big major challenge. So I think some of these things should actually inform us in terms of better understanding of the complexities in disaster management, in effective and efficient disaster management. And now we have advanced toolkits available. We have the artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, and we have the remote sensing and satellite imagery also helping us with INSAR, which is also helping us with uh, persistent scatter interferometry using synthetic aperture radars, the PS INSAR or the differential INSAR, which is DINSAR, which is again looking at differential interferometry with synthetic aperture radars, which can actually look at the deformations which are happening on some of the critical infrastructure and so on. So I think solutions are possible. We have different tools which can actually help disaster management professionals to come up with solutions. And I'm sure that I find this also coming up in our discussions within RedR India. And we find that there are a lot of professionals who are also understanding some of these new toolkits. So along with our skill sets, we need to also expose ourselves to the new toolkits, and that will be a message which can be taken forward by all of us, working with different disasters. So it is not only climate change induced hydrometeorological disasters, but also issues related to emerging disasters, which we are seeing. We are seeing stampedes happening in festivals or even in large footfall places. We find that we have actually not been able to really bring in the kind of solutions to understand and anticipate anticipatory risk governance. So these are some of the issues I thought that we will basically have to comprehend and recognize and start preparing ourselves for some of these new emerging disasters. We never knew that a global pandemic could actually paralyze communities across the world, more than 220 countries, and also impact very hugely in terms of our own preparedness levels. So a biological disaster could actually then paralyze humanity. So we need to prepare ourselves in terms of some of these emerging disasters and plan better to be effective and also improve the quality of life of the people. And I think that's very important because we need to also understand how lockdown actually created the problem in terms of interstate migrant workers traveling long distances when all the transportation routes and also various transportation sources were actually also not available, including trains and buses and many other modes of transport. I want to thank RedR India, Puthumai, the CEO of RedR India, Analia, who was actually coordinating and facilitating this, and Rahul Pandit for anchoring this so effectively and efficiently. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Menon. You beautifully rounded off the conversation and the theme for today's symposium. You also took us back to the very basics, essentially talking about differential vulnerability, for example, and how important it is to note it, and also in terms of the various events that are sort of cascading, compounding this entire nexus between the humanitarian phase and the development phase as well. So, thank you again, sir, for this pertinent talk. May I just invite you to address the first of the very many questions that have come in. So, the first question that is coming from the audience, sir, is when a primary climate hazard triggers a secondary risk, how can early warning systems be designed to alert communities to those secondary and tertiary domino effects rather than just the initial event? So,
A very good question. In fact, we find that the multi-hazard early warning systems concept is not really being understood by many institutions. When you say multi-hazard early warning system, it is actually something which is not looking at a single hazard. It is also looking at primary and secondary and tertiary impacts and what could actually be triggering from one incident to the other. It was mentioned about leptospirosis outbreak, after a flood, and this again is something which the health risk in disasters is not really fully understood. We really do not have the proper understanding in terms of the ground realities which happen. Just to give an example, in a relief camp, if you have people who are either organ transplant survivors or people who have to go through procedures like chemotherapy and radiation and kidney dialysis, and the systems actually cannot accommodate such people when there is a COVID lockdown. How do we really bring in such interfaces which can facilitate the understanding of the system and the functionaries to the needs of the ensuring that people actually need to be provided these procedures in spite of the issues in terms of regulatory compliances for social distancing or hospitals actually closing down, and you cannot actually move to places, there are restrictions and so on. I think these are some of the challenges, and so multi-hazard early warning systems should actually also facilitate the need for providing blood to thalassemia patients, hemophilia patients, and others who need blood transfusion. You also need various other systems. So I think we need to look at it as a interconnected system. Somebody actually in this presentation I saw that there was this mention about the need for understanding these linkages. So it's very important that we understand these, and we need to also train institutions to basically prepare themselves for these multi-hazard spillovers, second generation effects of disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, and may I please invite Dr. Dar for the next question. The next question is about cascading events. And is the next question is basically on the cascading events and its impacts on multiple sectors simultaneously, something that Dr. Dar has spoken of, and the fact that there needs to be interdepartmental cooperation. But the audience is asking, does interdepartmental boundaries create delays and coordination gaps? So the the possible answer is yes, but then I'd like to sort of expand on how interdepartmental boundaries can be erased for effective uh, management in terms of cascading events and disasters. Dr. Thar.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a good question, actually. But we are not talking about erasing or completely, uh, not setting any interdepartmental boundaries. But what we need to do is to have a mandate from the above, from the state or the national level authorities. They can have a state or a national policy requiring a joint exercise, combined with the local convening authorities, which can be empowered to schedule and enforce these protocols. Making joint simulations or compliance requirement, not just a best practice, is typically what moves it from operational to routine. We don't really नहीं आ रहा है एक मिनट इसको हटा
Okay, I think the point that Dr. Da was making is quite clear. While there's need for some level of protocols and the departmentalization, there is need for there is also need for that element of flexibility, and she's given some very hands-on sort of examples of how this can be done through joint simulations and making sure that the protocols are speaking the same language and people are understanding on who's to do what and how to sort of dovetail with each other in terms of actually getting things done on the ground. And some of the examples were also given by Avadi sir. Sir, the question for you now is more in terms of what we spoke after your presentation. And this was on the level of flexibility and contextualization, localization, contextualization based on local knowledge and local level commanders. That needs to be brought on in the standard operating protocols in India and elsewhere. So, in your experience, to what extent that level of flexibility is currently there? If not, then how can this be made any better? Thanks, sir.
Thank you for that question. Well, in the armed forces, we have a very cliched saying, we make great war plans. We have a national plan, we have a command plan, then we have a unit plan. It's called a war plan. It's sacrosanct. A lot of discussions go on, a lot of revisions happen. But when the previous commander was handing over the squadron that I was going to command in Chandigarh, he gave me a very good value line. He said, Shah, ये war plan hai, it is here, and just read the first page because as the balloon goes up or the first shot is fired, the rest of it is not going to be relevant. He said only the first preparatory thing, what you do at various levels of escalation, all that matters. He said thereafter there is no plan. This is the SOP. The plan is yours. Resources you have, what the situation you are facing, and how do you innovate, how do you improvise, how do you manage human and the resource conundrum that usually comes in. He said that is all there is to fighting a war, or being a part of a war effort. To me, a very similar thing, taking on from what Professor Menon sir also said, that today we may have SOPs, the district level SOP, a departmental SOP exists. If I can give a likeness to the war plan that I just gave an example of, the transport department has an SOP, the police has an SOP, the health department has a SOP. Now they are all sequential, as in this will happen, we will respond, we will step up. But as we are seeing, it is not sequentiality that matters now; it is simultaneity, and that is where I would bring this point about flexibility in SOPs. SOPs at best, and historically it is a proven fact, are at best your reference scale. They in fact tell you as a leader, as a manager, what you need to prepare for, not what you have to do. It is just a preparatory guide. You will have to understand the local conditions. You'll have to understand what, as the outbreak happens, how is this disaster panning out? How is it escalating? It's not a football match there where I have 11 players, the opposition is too short, we wait for the two players to come and then say let's have a football match. Disasters or wars don't work like that. So I guess flexibility will remain at the core, while SOPs can only so much do, because you can't blame the policymakers also, because they will have to have a starting point and they'll have to give you something in your hand for you to understand what is to be done. And that is where it rests. As a practitioner, as a practical responder, you will have to innovate, you will have to improvise, you will have to be flexible. That's where I would want to leave this question with. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very pertinent. Also the fact that you're coming in from the armed forces and much of what we do in disaster management comes from the language and the practices of the armed forces. I mean, you bring in that depth over here. And it also sort of harks back to the point that RedR has been making in terms of interdepartmental cooperation, the knowledge coming in from all sources, definitely so from the armed forces, which has actually practiced it. And armed forces play such an important role in disaster management in India, definitely so as per the laws of India as well. Thank you for that. May I just bring in the last question, and this is for Dr. Sharma. And this question is sort of interesting, very basic, sort of touched upon, but we would like you to sort of impress upon that particular question. Also, because you mentioned some of the challenges that come in with cascading disasters. So the question is as follows: what can individuals/communities do and prioritize while we prepare ourselves for one disaster, and what actually affects us is more devastating and is followed by the entire cascade of disasters. So it's very interesting. You prepare for something, but then it sort of compounds and cascades and all that. And this sort of harks back to the presentation you mentioned as well. So what do we do essentially? Some good answers and some ready sort of solutions around it. But I understand you also mentioned the challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. I hope you're able to hear me, right? Okay, perfect. So, great question, I would say. So, when we talk about prioritization, so it basically begins with understanding what kind of systemic risks are there rather those individual hazards. We should, per se, first try to understand and identify what are those critical system failures that are going to take place. What are those trigger points that are going to trigger these kind of cascading impacts, such as power failures, communication line, water supply, healthcare, transportation. The second thing comes across on the preparedness, which should focus on protecting the most vulnerable population, being the young ones, being the elderlies. These are the pointers which should be taken, because these are the people which take a little longer to cope up with these kind of cascading disasters. And finally, investing on these kind of governance systems, like investment should strengthen these kind of cross sectoral coordination. The training should happen, the preparedness meet should happen. There should be a multi-hazard disaster management cell per se. I'm just putting it out, and it should not be confined to a single sector or a department. The objective comes out not to prepare for every possible scenario, but just to build that system which might think what Dr. Sharjah also pointed out in the three cases, like improvisation should be there, but it cannot just be relied upon. So there should be systems which focus on these kind of prioritization. What could be those possible linkages? What could be those possibilities of those interconnectedness within these disasters? So these kind of things should be taken care of. Back to you, Rahul, if you could hear me.
Thank you. Excellent, Dr. Sharma. I mean, from what you've said, and I gather, is that some of the basics always remain the same, even in the case of cascading disasters. So you mentioned about what Professor Menon also mentioned in terms of differential vulnerability and preparing better at the community level, individual and community level, and making systems and incorporating that element of flexibility within the systems. And of course, the overall governance and the laws that define the rules and protocols that we need to build upon. A lot that RedR India can give back when it comes to collecting all of this and coming up with the training program that it plans to. I would also like to thank the very engaged participants, and some of the questions were actually very good and to the point, and our speakers have been able to answer that. With that, let me please hand over the session back to my colleague, Analia. Thank you.
College Video Competition. Welcome to the DRRCCA Club Inter-College Video Competition, focusing on engineering and nature-based solutions for climate resilience. This video serves as the official ceremony to recognize and honor the top student contributions. We are proud to present the top 3 participants who actively presented the innovative ideas which they have developed to foster climate resilience in their communities. In third place, we congratulate Pranav Parmar and his team from Marwadi University, Rajkot, for their insightful work on rainwater harvesting 2.0. Congratulations to Pranav Parmar and his team on receiving this certificate of achievement for their dedication to developing sustainable water solutions. In second place, we honor Hir Solanki from Marwadi University, Rajkot, for her creative and impactful project, Beat the Heat. Congratulations to Hir Solanki on this well-deserved recognition for her contribution to climate resilience and innovative problem solving. Our first place winner is Sayan Jana from Jharkhand Raksha Shakti University, recognized for his excellent project on the nature-based solution concept of Sponge City. Congratulations to Sayan Jana for achieving first place. This certificate reflects your outstanding contribution to the field of climate resilient engineering. Thank you to all our participants for your hard work and vision. Every solution submitted brings us closer to a more climate resilient future. This event was brought to you by RedR India. Recognizing the institutions that have actively participated and contributed to disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation throughout the 2025-2026 period, organized by RedR India. We begin by honoring the Government Degree College, Thindam Creedy in Jammu and Kashmir for their active participation, including their work on disaster concepts and digital preparedness. Next, we recognize the AAAM Degree College in Bamina, Srinagar, for their dedication to building disaster resilience through informative programming. We also celebrate the Hindustan College of Arts and Science in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, for their impactful awareness initiatives regarding flood preparedness. The Jharkhand Raksha Shakti University in Ranchi receives recognition for their creative awareness efforts and important local field studies. Finally, we applaud DIT University in Dehradun, Uttarakhand, for organizing Planet Pledge event and commitment to install disaster safety applications like Sachet.
Thank you to every student, faculty member, and club coordinator across 5 institutions who contributed to making our communities safer and more climate resilient.
For coordinating the tech support, to Rohit, to Shahjahan, and to all the to Bilqis, and to everyone around there. Our heartfelt thanks to you and all the viewers, both the RedR members and everyone who has joined us today from India and abroad. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Thank you. Good night.